Here's something that might make you a bit salty. You could be producing writing that's completely bland. Of all the words used to describe your writing or your novel, bland is probably not something that you want to be peppered with. Readers, as a rule, have a distaste for bland writing, and there are a lot of things you can do to spice your writing up. So, if in this season of your life you're cooking up a lot of bland writing, let's talk about some of the ways to change that. First, let's define what bland writing is, because this is a distinct problem from other problems. Bland writing is exactly as it sounds, writing that lacks flavor. Even if the events that it describes are exciting or engaging, the way that they are written doesn't convey this excitement. Mechanical, matter-of-fact writing that simply lists off events in chronological order will come across as bland. Writing that is sort of samey also comes across as bland because it's repetitive, and things that are repetitive tend to be kind of boring and bland. This is a distinct problem from, say, having prose that's hard to follow or prose that's difficult to understand. There are a lot of contexts where being able to produce bland writing is a good thing. The owner's manual for your dishwasher or a report from the Federal Reserve is probably written in a very bland but clear and readable way. Good technical writing is often very bland because the emphasis is on transmitting information as clearly as possible. Very proficient functional writing can be bland, but for engaging fiction, we want functional writing that isn't bland. We want to convey information, but also be entertaining. Your novel needs an additional layer to engage on a more emotional level. Your writing needs to be spiced up. Your writing can't be bland. Now, that doesn't mean that non-bland writing needs to be upbeat or exciting or even fast-paced. Depending on the tone of your novel, you could have writing that is dreary or gritty or depressing, and it's still not bland. Prose that manages to make a reader feel sad or depressed is not bland. Writing only becomes bland when it makes the reader not feel anything. Bland writing is like at zero. You can have happy, peppy, exciting prose that goes above zero, or you can write dark, scary, depressing prose that takes the reader to -10. Both will work, both are not bland. There are plenty of books that are completely depressing that people can't put down, and I wouldn't describe any of them as having bland writing. So let's talk about some of the things that go into making writing not bland. One of the biggest things that will make your writing not bland is shifting from describing or recounting events to describing what those events feel like. Describing what something feels like to a character, what effects that event is having on those characters, rather than just what the event is. Write about what it is like to experience the events of your story, not just what those events are. Describe the pain in a character's cheeks as they face down a winter wind, rather than just describing the wind as cold. Describe the sharp pain in their stomach as they get bayoneted, rather than just saying they got bayoneted. Describe their heart thudding in their chest or the sweat prickling down their back, rather than the fact that they feel nervous. Moving towards experiential descriptions in your writing will create a more visceral feeling in the reader. It will move them closer to feeling what it is like to take part in the story. Any writing that manages to do that is definitely not bland. Another element that goes towards non-bland writing is opinion. At least I think opinion contributes to non-bland writing. In fiction, you are almost always telling a story from a specific viewpoint, usually a character, sometimes a narrator. Whoever this viewpoint person is, they are going to have opinions about what's going on in the story, and you should inject your writing with those opinions. Instead of blandly describing your protagonist watching their neighbor mowing their lawn, you can instead color that writing by describing it in a way that aligns with what the protagonist thinks about their neighbor. If they hate their neighbor, they can talk about how annoying it is that they are mowing their lawn at 6 a.m. on a Sunday, or about how the idiot is blowing the grass clippings onto their driveway. Opinions add emotions to the writing, which is good. It also gives you an opportunity to characterize the characters a bit more, which is also good. It conveys the emotions, what those characters are feeling, which is also good. When you have a story with different viewpoint characters and you inject their opinions into the writing, you also create variety, which also happens to be something that's good for getting rid of bland writing. Variety, after all, is the spice of life, as they say, and it might also turn out to be the spice of good writing. Variety can come in a few different forms. One kind of concrete example that I'll talk about is dialogue attribution. Bland writing might use repetitive tags after each exchange. He said, he said, she asked, he replied. Instead, a non-bland way to do that is to use a mix of dialogue tags, action beats, and context to create variety. Changing up little things like how you attribute dialogue, so long as you're not sacrificing too much clarity to do it, can take bland, repetitive writing and move it into at least a little bit more interesting from a structural perspective. Another instance in using variety is something like sentence structure, varying how you start and set up your sentences, including things like the length of sentences, creates rhythm within the prose, and people like rhythm. It makes the prose a little bit more pleasant to read. Also consider things like how you use white space and how you have varying lengths of paragraphs. If you're always plodding along with like the same length of paragraph, switching it up a little bit, having more passages with more white space or some passages with longer paragraphs, that can help to add a little bit of variety. Readers will move faster through passages with more white space and slower through longer paragraphs. Slower and faster is not better or worse. Variety and making sure that the slower or faster kind of fits the pacing of the writing, that's what matters. It's not that any of this stuff is better or worse than others. It's just that having variety, having mixtures of different things throughout the prose adds more variety, which makes the writing less bland. Speaking of bland things, the conclusion to this video is pretty bland because I really didn't write one. Anyway, so there you have it. I'd love to hear about some of the things that you feel make writing bland in the comments down below, or some of the things that make writing spicy, but not like spicy like in the, you know what I mean. Anyway, if you want to see more stuff like this, you can check out all my other writing advice related videos and subscribe to my channel. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.